Production funding is provided by A. Reddix and Associates, Health Information Resource Center, offering short-term training for long-term professional careers in medical coding. HIRCVA.net.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Godley, co-producer of Another View, filling in for Barbara Ham-Lee. Now usually on show days, I can be found in the control room calling for the different video elements you see in the show, or telling Barbara through her earpiece just how much time she has left to interview our guest. Well, today our director of production, Mark Burnett, is talking to me in my ear. And Mark, I'm listening. Throughout my career, I've interviewed a lot of people, but it's rare that I get an opportunity to sit down with someone who specializes in so many different areas. I'm referring to Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Voted one of the 100 most influential Black Americans, Dr. Dyson is the author of 16 books focusing on race, politics, and the African American experience. He's a nationally known television commentator, an accomplished radio talk show host, a professor of sociology at Georgetown University, and an ordained Baptist minister. And as I quickly found out, no matter what topic you tackle or angle you choose, Michael Eric Dyson is never at a loss for words. So I asked this well-known orator if he rehearses before delivering his thought-provoking commentary or if his comments are off the cuff. And this is what he had to say.
It's literally a reflex, and you say things based upon hopefully your intelligence, your insight, and your humor combined. Because, wittiness or humor become vehicles at least to convince others or persuade them of the rightness of your cause, or at least of the legitimacy of your viewpoint. And sometimes you win more by honey than by vinegar. And if you can diffuse the situation by making people feel at one or comfortable or laugh a little bit, which hopefully in my speech I'll try, it may help communicate difficult messages, because some of the messages I have to bring to both mainstream white America and to pockets of Black America and others, don't go over so easily. So you got to try a little humor and try to, if you will, present it in as non-threatening a fashion as possible, because the message itself may sometimes be powerful.
Dr. Dyson's background is a little unusual for an academic. As a teenager growing up in Detroit, he was both an unwed father and a gang member. But by the time he was 21 years old, Michael Eric Dyson had turned his life around. He'd married his son's mother and was an ordained Baptist minister. As a Baptist preacher, he does not shy away from topics about the Black church. So I asked if he thought the Black church has lost its effectiveness when it comes to bringing about social change.
Well, it certainly has become distracted. The gospel of material prosperity has burgeoned and flourished so much within so many sanctuaries that one fears that the strict attention to social justice that has been never the center of the Black church, but a central tenet of the social gospel that has been promulgated in the Black church. Attention to social transformation and political transformation under the aegis and under the guidance of the Spirit of Jesus, who says we got to be concerned about people's bodies as well as souls, that we got to bring justice to unjust situations, and we have to redistribute wealth and resources to make certain that the resources of charity and of education and of financial security are not primarily or exclusively in the hands of the rich and the well-to-do, but also within the reach of those who are vulnerable and poor. And in that sense, I think that there continue to be great Black churches that do so. So yeah, there are many churches that do understand the necessity for social gospel, but so many others have been diverted from the fundamental tradition of the social gospel movement, which again, I can never claim to be at the heart of Black religion, but certainly was a central tenet of the social gospel movement that helped transform America. Martin Luther King Jr. comes from that tradition, Jesse Jackson from that tradition, William Gray from that tradition, and I think we have to nurture that and continue to remind people that the church at its best is always concerned about not only what goes on within sanctuaries, but finding sanctuary for the insecure and the vulnerable and making certain that the gospel can speak prophetically to them.
Dyson is known for his humor and quick wit, but when it comes to education, well, that's something he takes very seriously. By the time he was 24 years old, he'd earned the first of several degrees. He says his quest for education came out of his desire to have a better future for his son. He shares his knowledge not only with his students at Georgetown University, but with the world through his writings. He recently challenged students and faculty at the College of William and Mary when he talked about the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's a topic he has studied extensively and written about in 2 books, I May Not Get There With You, The True Martin Luther King Jr., and April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr.'s Death and How It Changed America.
But it was not until he got to Morehouse at 15, went on an early admission program because black men had been depleted their numbers by the Second World War, and as a result of that, they looked for bright young men to fill the ranks, and Martin Luther King Jr., Maynard Jackson later on would get in under the same program. Came early, 15 years old. 15, what were you doing? Think about it. Were you ready for college at 15? Are you ready at 23? And so King graduates at 19, C student, but he begins to mature and accepts his call to ministry. He sees you can be smart and intelligent and a preacher at the same time. He accepts his call to ministry, preaches his first sermon, goes off to seminary, 19 years old, graduates 3 years later, goes off to get a PhD in philosophical theology, compares the theologies of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Wyman, and then gets called to a Baptist church in Montgomery, Alabama. And there at 26 years old, not yet having finished his PhD dissertation, the social movement erupts because it doesn't take its time and it doesn't make it convenient for you. King had to respond to the arrest of Rosa Parks. And oh, isn't it nice and neat? Rosa Parks was a seamstress who was tired one day on the bus. And when they asked her to stand up and give her seat to a white man, she says, "I'm tired." And as a result of stumbling upon history, she catalyzes a social movement. Come on. That don't even sound right. Rosa Parks was a revolutionary. She ain't stumbled into history. She meant to do that. Martin Luther King Jr. comes along, silver-tongued, golden-throated orator. Although he got a C in preaching. Now, who looks dumb now? And he's thrust into the movement, and the rest, as they say, is history. And so the transformation was brutal, though. Blood was shed, mostly black blood, and the blood of white martyrs who joined black people, and brown martyrs, too. They hung Mexicans, too. Like animals they were treated. And now Tucker Carlson wants to execute Michael Vick. Think about if we applied that to your people who murdered us. Well, do we want to execute them? No. We said love. Black folk didn't go the Al-Qaeda route. If we did, Al-Negra. We'd have gone up in stores. Instead of trying to sit down and sit in, we'd have pulled the bomb. Oh, we can't have no coffee? Hiya!
Dr. Dyson is known for making his readers and audiences think. In his book, Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster, he's quoted as saying, "Charity is no substitute for justice." He goes on to say, "We must never ignore the injustices that make charity necessary or the inequalities that make it possible." The highly visible and always quotable Dyson says he knows people don't always agree with what he says, but that's not his goal.
Some of the messages I have to bring to both mainstream white America and to pockets of black America and other others, you know, don't go over so easily. So you got to try a little humor and try to, if you will, present it in as non-threatening a fashion as possible, because the message itself may sometimes be powerful. Be careful to stencil President Obama's face next to King's on a T-shirt. It makes for good commercialism, but it's horrible philosophy. And I love Obama. I was one of the first black so-called prominent people to endorse him when most black folk were still with Hillary. Because they were, you know, beholden to the Clintons. Because Bill Clinton was cool. Like that. He went to black churches and he knew the hymns and the hymn lines. Yes. That man knew the third verse to lift every voice and sing. Black folk will come, is that a verse? Is that real? Is he making that up? God of our weary years, God of our sigh, come on Negroes, God of our silent tears. Then he signed the crime bill that hurt black people so bad. 3 strikes and you're out is not a Republican, but a Democratic tradition. A blue ribbon panel said, don't sign it, Mr. Clinton, because it will create a gross disparity between those who are caught with crack cocaine versus those with powder, and it will send them to jail in disproportionate fashion. And he signed it anyway. The first black president. And I was one of the first surrogates when people were standing with the Clintons. Because I've known Obama since '91. I said, let's roll with Obama. Because I believed in him and felt that he had something magical. Black people say, who are you with Barack Obama for? Then he won Iowa. Black folks said, slow down. Ain't but 4 Negroes in Iowa. And 3 of them work there during the day and then go home at night. Slow down. That boy, he's something else. Then black folks started getting excited. He might could win. And then they went from one extreme, not giving the brother a chance, to just being uncritical. Like Obama mania. I understand it, because when you the first, and we ain't never had no black president, so y'all got to excuse us. We getting a little crazy. I mean, y'all done had 43. This old hat, oh, well, and the white guy's in the White House, whatever. I know many white people say to me, wait a minute now. He's half white too now. We've got half on him. Okay, 43 and a half presidents have been white. I said those same white people, though, you know, there's some half-white people in prison. Claim them, too. Don't just claim the good Negroes.
Although he's a scholar, he has never distanced himself from popular culture. As a college professor, he took rap into the classroom at the University of North Carolina, offering a course on the effects of gangster rap on societal values. The class was packed every semester between 1995 and 1997. When he left to become a distinguished visiting professor at Columbia University, he expanded the course, connecting gangster rap to religion, family, literature, and poetry. Since he's so versed in the spoken word, I asked Dr. Dyson his thoughts about a person's inability to change from informal language to a more formal type of speech, or as we've come to know it, code switching.
Yo, I don't really be knowing what you're talking about. Yeah, code switching is something that is necessary. You know, I try to teach my son, when you're with your people, holler at your people like you talk to them. What's up? How you doing? What's up? You know, that's beautiful. We all did that in every generation. How you feeling? 5 on the black hand side. What's up? Ain't nothing shaking but the peas in the pod. They would be shaking if the water wasn't hot. Good. But when you go to work, hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? Now, that doesn't mean that one has to surrender the integrity of the linguistic complexity that characterizes black, interactions, especially given the visceral and sensual nature of the language. Because black folk have changed America when it comes to language. It is kind of unfair that people make millions and millions of dollars on television imitating black speech, but if a black person actually exhibits that speech, they're seen as dumb. It is quite interesting. So even though we teach our kids about code switching, we need to do code switching too. Hip-hop didn't code switch. Hip-hop said, guess what? I ain't changing nothing. It's only right that I was born to use mics, and the stuff that I write is even tougher than dice. I'm taking rapping to a new plateau through rap slow. My rhyming ain't a vitamin hell without a cap, so. Well, nobody said to Nas, you have to code switch. Nas understood that he articulated the powerful ambition of his own culture in a way that made white America pay attention to him. See, civil rights generation is about crossing over to the dominant society, speak like they speak, or speak to the best of our ability in ways that they might find elegant and eloquent. That's beautiful, but that ain't the only tradition. And what's interesting, we're telling kids to maintain their excellence in a linguistic practice where the dominant culture has made a lot of money off of, where you at? Where you at? Remember those old white women were talking to each other and, I'm out here chilling. So Pillsbury Doughboy is rapping. So commodification of black languages and language arts is running afoot, even as the very people who originated them don't get a chance to participate and partake. At the same time, let's not be silly, we have to teach our children to be both and, not either or, to be masters of street discourse or informal discourse or vernacular discourse, as well as commanding the language. But it doesn't mean that if you command the language that you're going to be respected. Obama ain't talking slang, and he getting dissed every day. Jay-Z is spitting much slang and getting mad respect. So it may not be the one-to-one correlation we seek, though, at the end of the day, of course, it's necessary for young people who won't be regarded as Jay-Z to master the king's English to the queen's taste, so to speak, even though we understand some of these injustices that prevail.
I asked Dr. Dyson to leave us with a few suggestions that he thought would improve our community, and that's just what he did.
Well, improvement begins with I. So start with yourself, I don't want a Michael Jackson evangelical gospel here, but, start with the man in the mirror. And, help yourself, as the great group with the Staple singer said, if you want to help the pollution, put your hand over your mouth when you cough, that'll help the solution. So obviously you want to begin with yourself, but your immediate community, your home. Am I the best husband or wife or child or father or daughter or relative I can be? Am I the best school teacher or ditch digger I can be? Am I the best driver I can be? Am I the best professor I can be? You want to do whatever you do with excellence. I mean, that is a hallmark of not only great service, but also of a moral ambition to see the relationship between doing good and doing well and being a good force in this world. And we can strengthen our communities by teaching our children, by giving them a hunger for education. And I'm not one of these people, who beats up on social media and Twitter and Facebook. Yes, done messed up some of the language, but you can still be literate. You can still find ways to express yourself. Whether you're reading a comic book or whether you're reading Keats or whether you're reading, Paul Laurence Dunbar or Toni Morrison. Figure out ways to become literate and be in touch with other human beings who are literate and discuss ideas. And then forge links in communities to represent, your interests. One of the ways things get changed is that the dominant society has taught us is that you got to raise a ruckus. You got to write your congressman or woman. You've got to say, I want that television show on, and flood the lines of NBC or ABC or CBS. Or you've got to, flood the lines of the White House and say, we disagree with X, Y, and Z. So that kind of social momentum and social mobility ends up sometimes catalyzing some transformation in ways we might not have discovered. Or we want to boycott something. Get together and make sure that your interests are well defined and that your identities are well established. And when you do that as a community and as a people, when you do that, the world is made much better, and you don't have to be divisive. The kind of vicious invective that's being hurled in the name of political, rhetoric now is pretty bad. I think Sarah Palin has the right to say what she has to say, but I don't think you have a right to be put in crosshairs on people's districts. you ain't the only righteous person. Because you're a right-wing conservative doesn't mean you're the patriot. In fact, you know, it's interesting to me that people who were secessionists from this union in Virginia, who wanted to leave the United States of America, have the nerve, the unabashed temerity to call somebody else a traitor, and you have a Confederate flag. You stood against America. So be careful about flinging around, you know, these notions of who's not a patriot. When Senator John McCain says about Barack Obama that I disagree with his politics, but I think he wants the best for this country and he's a patriot, he gets beat up by other conservatives and people to the far right. You don't have a copyright on what's real or righteous. And so we need to be a bit more humble and self-reflective. And when we do that, I think we'll have better communities.
I'd like to thank Dr. Dyson for taking time to share his thoughts, suggestions, humor, and advice with our Another View audience. When we come back, we'll go behind the scenes and meet some of the actors taking center stage in August Wilson's last play, Radio Golf. But first, here's what's happening in Hampton Roads. This is the 32nd season for the Virginia Stage Company, and they're closing it out with a marvelous documentation of the joys and plights of African Americans in the 20th century. It's called Radio Golf, and it's part of a 10-play cycle written by the late August Wilson. So sit back and enjoy as we introduce you to some of the characters that make this play a theatrical experience. It's nothing unusual to see stories about blighted areas being transformed into new apartments, condos, retail shops, and restaurants. But it's rare to see such a process played out on stage. That's just what the late playwright August Wilson does with Radio Golf.
I've had an affidavit drawn up that Herman needs to sign. Until I can get it on docket, I was granted a temporary injunction to stop the demolition.
I just drove by the site. They got 2 bulldozers sitting up there.
What are you talking about, bulldozers? They can't tear down the house. I was granted a temporary injunction.
There's a bunch of people up there, too.
The Virginia Stage Company brings the story to life with a cast of talented actors, including Morocco Amari, who plays Harmon Wilkes.
Hold me to it. Harmon Wilkes for mayor. Mayor Wilkes. It was almost you. All you had to do was follow the plan.
Harmon Wilkes is a real estate developer in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. He grew up in the Hill District, and he wants to gentrify the Hill District, and he decides to run for mayor.
And there on one of the doors was my name, Harmon Wilkes. That looked good, I thought. Yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be.
At the core of it, it's love. You know, it's a person who has a love of his community, you know, a love for his family, his wife. He has a love for his city, the city of Pittsburgh, and wanting to do right. He means well. He really does.
But Harmon's political aspirations and desire to renovate a portion of his old neighborhood hits a snag when he realizes that a piece of history could be lost in the midst of a revitalized community.
I can't follow the plan this time, man. I'm afraid if you look away from what's wrong, you won't turn back. Start all the time looking for what's in this for me.
You have this redevelopment, and it, you know, on the one hand you say, oh, this is great, you know, but then on the other hand, they're moving out people, older people, or people who can't afford the taxes anymore. They're moving them out and further outside the city. You're turning apartments into condos and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's, you know, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other.
E. Roger Mitchell plays Roosevelt Hicks, Harmon's childhood friend, who's a little rough around the edges, but excited about the money that a new project could bring.
Look at these. Picked them up at the station today.
Roosevelt is pretty aggressive. He is the antagonist in many ways in this show. So he's very hungry, very ambitious, a risk taker, you know, puts a lot on the line. But he expects rewards, and time is always of the essence.
And then there's veteran actor Cedric Young, who plays Sterling Johnson.
Take the golf clubs as a present.
That's not the same thing.
Look like the same thing to me, but then maybe I'm wrong. What do I?
Well, just a sense of the history of our people and how we've kind of come along, and a lot of August's plays are historical. I just hope people can understand that if they go back and look at some of the other plays, they can get a little sense of the history of black folks, and black folks as well as white people can get that sense of where we've come from.
Radio Golf is set in Pittsburgh in the late 1990s and is a wonderful look at the dealings and discussions, triumphs and turmoil that could touch any community, be it past or present. You can see this talented group of actors perform now through April 17th at the Wells Theater in downtown Norfolk.
Your campaign, that old house, the hill, you're on your own with all that.
And that's our show for this evening. If you're not a member of WHRO, please join. Our membership ensures that programs like Another View and all of our locally produced programs can stay on the air. Basic membership is $48. Next week, asthma and the African American community. Information you won't want to miss. We'll see you next time for Another View.
Production funding is provided by A. Reddix and Associates, Health Information Resource Center, offering short-term training for long-term professional careers in medical coding. HIRCVA.net.